You are now watching the series Notepad App, Python, and Qt. This is episode 3, and we will work on the file dialogs. With that said, let's dive in. To handle the on-click events, we first have to write functions within our QML context. Inside our application window, we can directly write JavaScript functions. Using the function keyword, we will be able to define a new custom function. I will now define the main handler for the toolbar buttons. Let's call it toolbar click handler. I'll name the parameter option. Inside the function, I will define a switch statement. We'll check the value of option. So there will be 4 cases. The first one being new. Let's add a break keyword. And the second one will be open. The third one will be save. And the last one will be save as. Let's go back to our toolbar. Inside the button of the repeater, we can write on clicked and directly pass toolbar click handler. Don't forget to pass the option argument, which should be buttons.model index. So when this button is clicked, it will pass the corresponding text inside the model array to the toolbar click handler function. And inside this function, it will perform different actions based on the button that is clicked. Now we have to define another element, which is a file dialog. Only one file dialog will be sufficient to handle both opening and saving. Let's first give the file dialog an ID of file dialog. And for the title of the window, we can set it to please choose a file. And inside the file dialog, we have to give it a mode property, which tells the file dialog whether we're trying to open a file or save a file. We do it by using the property keyword. And for the type, it should be int, which is an integer. Let's call it mode. And we have to specify a default value. In this case, it will be 0. There will be 2 outcomes, accepted or rejected. Accepted means a file is selected or a target directory is selected. And we handle this case by using the onAccepted property. And inside, we will write some JavaScript to handle this case. And we do the same for onRejected. Now for onRejected is rather easy. We just write this dot close. So this line directly closes the file dialog and does nothing. Now let's go to the top of the script. Let's define a string property, and I'll name it path with a default value of blank. So we set a path string property, which can be accessed across the entire application window. Going back to the file dialog, in the onAccepted method, we will set the path property of the application window to file dialog.file.toString.replace file blank. So it takes the file dialog and gets the path of the target file. And we don't want the prefix, so we replace it with blank. Below this line, we will call a function called file handler, which we will create later. And let's pass the mode to this function. And finally, we have to close the dialog after the file is accepted. Now at the end of the script, let's create a new function which handles the opening of a file. We'll set the mode of the file dialog to 0 and set the title of the dialog to open. And here we will set the file mode of the file dialog to file dialog.open. And finally, we open the file dialog. That means showing it. Then we will create another function called save. And here we will set the mode of file dialog to 1, that means saving. And we set the title of the dialog to save. And now we have to set the file mode to file dialog.savefile. I'm sorry, for the open method, it should be open file. And finally, we have to show the file dialog. Let's also create a new function called new. And inside, we will first set the path to blank and set file dialog.mode to 0. And we have to clear the text area, so simply call textArea.clear. And now we have to define the file handler function. And it takes a mode argument. Inside this function, we will check if mode is equal to 0, then it should be opening a file. And therefore, we will write textArea.text equals to manager.load. So currently manager is not yet defined. It should be a Python class, and we will define it in the next episode. Now, below this, let's write else if mode is equal to 1, that means saving. Then we should call the manager.save method, and we'll pass the path and the text area.text, which is the content of the text area. If we now go back to the toolbar click handler, we can assign the different functions that we have just created to the different cases. Let's save it and run it. It appears we cannot use new as a function name, so let's call it new file instead. Let's save it and run it. Now if we click on the open method, it should show the open file dialog. And we will be able to select a file, and if we click cancel, nothing happens. If we select a file, but since we haven't created a manager class, so nothing is going to happen right now. Let's type some random text here. If we click new, the text area should be cleared. If we hit save, it should bring up the file saving dialog, where we can specify the location and specify the name of the file. In the next episode, we will go back to the Python side and work on file reading and saving. I'm YellowFlicker, and I will see you in the next episode. Stay tuned!